black woman slept on the plane, until the captain asked terrified, any fighter pilot on board. The air in the first-class cabin of the transatlantic Flight 815 was thick with privilege and the faint scent of expensive leather. Dr. Ava Sharpe had settled deep into her plush seat, headphones on, a tattered copy of a dense engineering textbook resting on her lap. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman finally finding a few hours of uninterrupted rest after months of punishing work. Across the aisle, a man in a crisp suit, a venture capitalist named Mr. Harrington, watched her with a mixture of vague annoyance and judgment. He had already observed her casual clothes and simple carry-on bag, silently cataloging her as an anomaly in the first-class section, likely an upgrade or a mistake. He'd seen her briefly discussing a complex equation with the flight attendant earlier, dismissing it as meaningless jargon. Now, Ava was asleep, completely detached, an island of stillness in the cruising aircraft. Harrington sneered faintly, returning to his financial reports. He mentally filed her away as non-essential. Then, the calm shattered. It began not with a bang, but with a shudder, a deep, irregular groan from the aircraft's belly. It wasn't turbulence, it was mechanical agony. The cabin lights dimmed, flickered violently, and stayed at a sickly yellow half-power. A chime, usually soft and polite, rang repeatedly, turning into an urgent, grating alarm. The flight attendants, practiced masters of calm, were suddenly running, their faces stripped of their professional smiles, revealing raw panic. A voice, tight and untrained, came over the intercom, clearly the co-pilot. His usual easy confidence was replaced by a stammering desperation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a severe pressure fluctuation in the port engine housing. We are attempting to compensate. Please remain seated and review emergency procedures. The plane dropped. Not a light dip, but a violent, stomach-lurching plunge that lasted several agonizing seconds. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins. Screams, choked off by fear, echoed through the cabin. Ava's eyes snapped open. She didn't panic. She didn't even grab her seatbelt. Her gaze immediately went to the emergency exit light, assessing the pitch and speed of the shutter. She recognized the feeling instantly, not random failure, but a catastrophic loss of primary hydraulic pressure on the left wing. Mr. Harrington, pale and trembling, fumbled for a sick bag. He looked at Ava, who was already standing, calm and focused. "Sit down, woman. Are you insane? We're going down." Ava ignored him, moving toward the front of the cabin with an unnerving, deliberate stride. And then, the intercom crackled again. But this time, it was the captain. His voice was raw, ragged, and thick with undisguised terror, a sound that stole the air from the lungs of every passenger. The captain's words echoed through the dying aircraft, a desperate, final plea. Is there a qualified pilot on board? Someone with heavy air experience? We've lost our hydraulics and the co-pilot is incapacitated. Please. For the love of God. Any fighter pilot on board. The cabin went silent, save for the engine's ragged protest. Every eye searched, expecting to see a military man, a weathered veteran in uniform. Harrington, his eyes wide with fear, suddenly saw Ava standing in the aisle, heading toward the cockpit. He scoffed, a strangled sound of disbelief. Her? She's just the janitor's daughter who cleaned the office floors last week. She can't fly. A flight attendant, near tears, met Ava in the aisle. Ma'am, you need to sit. It's too dangerous. Ava didn't stop. She simply pulled a small, laminated card from the inner pocket of her jacket, a card that bore the unmistakable seal of the U.S. Air Force Test Command. She looked the terrified attendant straight in the eye. My name is Major Ava Sharpe, Ret. Call sign, Shadow. I was head of the F-22 Hydraulic Stress Unit for 5 years. My primary job was landing impossible planes. Now step aside. The flight attendant, stunned into obedience, moved back. Ava entered the cockpit. The scene was worse than she imagined. The main dash was dark, covered in warning lights. The captain, a gray-haired man named David, was shaking violently, his hands gripped uselessly on the unresponsive yoke. The co-pilot was slumped forward, knocked unconscious by the initial impact. Captain, I'm taking control. What's the damage report? David looked at her, a civilian, a black woman in a simple sweater, and the desperate choice registered. He relinquished his seat with a single, exhausted nod. We lost the main pumps. Complete starboard aileron failure. We're pitching hard to the left, and the rudder is sluggish. We have maybe 15 minutes before we spin into uncontrolled descent. Ava didn't touch the controls immediately. She took 5 seconds to absorb the chaos, her mind calculating altitude, airspeed, and fuel load. The ailerons are gone. We're flying on pure stabilizer trim and differential thrust. We have to use the engines to turn. She barked orders, her voice cool and commanding, the voice of a professional accustomed to high G stress. Give me max power on port engine 1. Cut throttle to starboard 2. We need to bank right, now. The engine roared, compensating for the lost hydraulics. The plane shuddered again, but the violent roll stabilized slightly. She was flying an Airbus like it was an experimental fighter jet, using asymmetrical thrust to maneuver a heavy commercial liner. For the next 10 minutes, the air was a whirlwind of commands, engine noise, and pure friction. Ava wrestled the dying plane, her muscles coiled, her focus absolute. She instructed Captain David to manually pressurize the auxiliary fuel lines, a risky, complex procedure that required 2 hands and perfect timing. While she fought the pitch of the descent, she aimed for a small, remote military base in Newfoundland, the only viable runway within range. Approaching runway. We'll have no flaps. Gear down, Captain. Brace for maximum speed landing. I'm going to kick the rudder hard on contact to scrub the remaining speed. It's going to be rough, but it will save the fuselage. The final seconds were agonizing silence. The landing gear slammed down. The runway rushed up. Ava, drawing on every impossible simulation run in her Air Force career, executed the move. The plane hit the asphalt, skidding violently, tires smoking, engines screaming as she slammed the reverse thrusters. The final screech was a victory cry. The plane lurched, bounced, and finally, came to a halt on the runway, intact. In the cabin, there was no applause, only a profound, shuddering silence of relief. The captain emerged, physically exhausted but spiritually renewed. He walked directly to Ava, ignoring the military personnel now swarming the plane. He saluted her, then pulled her into a fierce, grateful embrace. You are the greatest pilot I have ever flown with. You saved a whole plane load of people that never knew you existed. Ava looked back at the first-class cabin, at the faces of people like Harrington, whose assumptions had just been violently rearranged. She had been invisible and mocked, a janitor's daughter sleeping on a plane. But when the world needed salvation, they had to beg for the expertise she possessed, the very expertise they had overlooked. She just smiled. Now, if you don't mind, Captain, I need to get back to my book. I have a connecting flight, and I'm still running low on sleep. The flight attendants, still trembling, watched as Ava calmly retrieved her worn textbook, tucked it under her arm, and walked out into the blinding daylight of the runway. Somewhere behind her, Mr. Harrington sat in silence, realizing that true power wasn't loud, rich, or dressed in suits. It was quiet. Patient. Hidden. Waiting to be called upon when the sky itself fell apart.